In New York, MacLeod comes across Castigear, another immortal here for the gathering. They're old friends, so they just share a drink rather than trying to decapitate each other. Discussing it conjures up old memories. Yep, the time that they were on the run from the Trade Federation and had to land on Tatooine. Actually, it reminds MacLeod that he got so drunk he was forced into a duel with Mr. Bassett on Boston Commons. Except he's too drunk to win and too immortal to die. So after being run through quite a few times, he seems to realize the pointlessness of this and apologizes. Getting back to New York, am I the only one who wanted to see the Terminator coming up the hall the other way? After a disagreement with the proprietor, we next encounter the Kurgan fighting Castigear in an alley, as witnessed by some one-man war on crime guy with a ton of guns. He's so excited he heads out there to deal with them. The beheading under Madison Square Garden was just one of several, so that's why he's stepping in. When you'd expect he'd normally go after drug dealers or gangs, in this case, guys with a sword, that is a big deal beyond the novelty of it. When the Kurgan takes off Castigear's head, the ex-Marine unloads on him with full auto, so he responds by impaling the guy on his sword before flinging him away, then gets around to the lightning orgasm. With that done, he runs off to get a ride out of here. Not many people know that it was the Kurgan who invented ride-sharing. Mom. At least he respects our senior citizens. Shockingly, Pincushion Punisher survived and is visited in the hospital by the cops. They show a picture of MacLeod, but he says it wasn't him, no matter how much the detective pushes the "no, this is the guy" on him. But the scar from Ramirez's cut is a dead giveaway that it's not this guy. Although after he tells them what he saw, well, they think he's nuts. Personally, just seeing a guy drive around with a trunk full of guns looking for people to shoot, that was really all I needed to reach that conclusion. Well, Brenda wants to know more and finds the birth certificate of Russell Nash and talks to the doctor who delivered him to try to learn about him. Only turns out Russell Nash died moments after he was born. What gets weirder is when the computer expert digs through the records, tracking all the times the shop changed hands, found out it was first built in the 18th century, and in all cases, it was inherited by someone who actually had died at birth. Then, he took all the signatures on the documents, put it together, and saw they're all done in identical handwriting.
So what you got here, Brenda, is a guy who's been creeping around since at least 1700. Pretending to croak every once in a while.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Leaving all his goods to kids who've been corpses for years and assuming their identities.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't really listening. I was just wondering if one day maybe we could use this technology to invest in extremely expensive pictures of bored cartoon apes? Well, obviously. MacLeod is off lighting a candle to Heather as he'd promised, but the Kurgan soon arrives to put it out, and all the rest of them too. He was likely born before Abraham, after all. I wish we could go back to our traditional values and sacrifice a goat to appease the moon. Ramirez had explained that holy ground is the one place where they cannot fight one another.
Happy Halloween, ladies!
The clergy is fair game, though. In the course of the conversation, the Kurgan reveals what he did to Heather, not knowing she was MacLeod's wife and not Ramirez's, until he sees the look on the Highlander's face. MacLeod storms out, but the Kurgan's behavior has forced the priest to come deal with this. And it leads to an exchange that can be interpreted in two different ways, or maybe even both.
People are trying to pray. You're disturbing them.
He cares about these helpless mortals.
The question is the Kurgan speaking to the priest, or is he ignoring him and just talking to himself?
Of course he cares. He died for our sins.
That shall be his undoing.
I think it's more likely the latter case, that he realizes MacLeod cares about mortals, given his reaction to what happened to Heather, so he knows a mortal can be used against MacLeod. It could mean the same even if he is responding to the priest, though, that a powerful being can be undone if they're willing to die for mortals might have inspired this course of action. Another interpretation could also be that with the power of the prize, the Kurgan will stride the world as a god, and his own glory will be the undoing of those who came with love instead of with strength like him. In either case, the Kurgan replies with mockery, quoting Psalm 22, "I am a worm," before licking the guy's hand. That's one of those scenes that I wonder how many takes were required before the director was satisfied. Brenda shows up at the antique shop saying she knows all about Nash. So MacLeod takes her upstairs to the room we'd seen him in earlier, filled with all kinds of objects from throughout his life, and he shares that he is roughly 500 years old and immortal, which he proves by having her hold a knife and then takes her hand and shoves it into his chest. Hurts like a son of a bitch, but that's all. Well, with that settled, it's time for the shagging. But then after all the nookie is done, he says he can't get involved with someone in that way again.
Hello, pretty.
Kurgan doesn't seem to be bothered by attachments. Luckily, she makes it into her apartment before he can reach her. So at least someone will know this was a kidnapping. The Kurgan drives like somebody who knows he can't die, which freaks Brenda out even more. Throw in some hitting pedestrians and knocking a motorcycle off the road, and she finally just passes out. Well, he leaves a message for MacLeod, who makes it clear to Rachel everything has been sorted. However this thing ends, though, he's not going to be coming back. Gotta not be weighed down by things, man. Well, MacLeod arrives to find Brenda strung up on the big sign, which naturally is just to draw him into striking range. So they fight, and they fight, and they fight, and they fight, the Kurgan weakening the sign to put Brenda at risk and distract MacLeod. Well, I'm afraid he's not biting. He's come here, he's trying to stop the Kurgan, he's doing his part, but frankly, the fight's hard enough with the two of them being down here zapped by electricity the whole time. Eventually they fall through the skylight, MacLeod losing his sword, and...
So now it ends.
Crap, that always works in the movies. This distraction gives MacLeod the time he needs to get his sword for the big final match. Well, like a chicken, being beheaded is not enough to stop the Kurgan immediately. It takes a little while for it to kick in, but then...
There can be only one.
Well, the mother of all power-ups happens. MacLeod cries out, "The quickening overpowers me." Later on, the quickening will be used to describe this situation when the energy is transferred, and it's easy to see why that conclusion was reached based upon that line. But recalling the way the quickening was earlier described, connecting to the stag and all that, it takes a different meaning when you include MacLeod's next lines. I feel everything. I know everything. I am everything. In that light, it suggests that the quickening is that sensation of connection that it has been throughout the film. Now that he is one, he's got the totality of it, the whole of creation connected with himself. He can even have children, age, and pass away. Possibly he must, possibly because he can choose to. The voice of Ramirez within him makes clear he's got great power now. Whether that's the power to influence things because of what he knows, or literal power, that's open to interpretation. As is the film itself. I've already discussed many aspects of the production, like the swordsmanship and music in the background video for this film, and I think I've made my position on those things very clear. During my research, I was shocked by the amount of hate even contemporary filmgoers have for this film. While I can certainly spot some flaws in it, for example, the murder investigation storyline continues after it stops having any effect on the events, yet doesn't have a resolution either. By and large, though, I think this is maybe a case of being diminished only when held up against those who built upon it. The use of its style and technique and the realistic sword fighting, you can see them in later great works, which might make it hard to recognize how fresh this was for its time. Additionally, Highlander helped blaze the trail for those later works. Perhaps this all sounds like apologism, but... well, yes, it's not a perfect film, but it certainly stepped into an area no one else was and did so in a way that sparked the imagination. Perhaps it's a little scruffy around the edges, but ultimately that, like Connery's easy performance and Clancy Brown's villainy. It's just part of the charm. This idea, this cast, this execution, to me at least, it's a kind of magic.
I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.